Hello everyone, welcome back to Grey Owl Reviews. It's been a while since I did another one of these. No excuse really, just a lot of things going on in the world right now. Been hard to see movies. But yeah, I think I'd give my thoughts on this movie today because this is a movie that I've been anticipating for a while, and it's finally here. Does it deliver on the promise of having two of cinema's most beloved monsters clashing it out? I'd say so, for the most part. And I know I usually have structure to this, but you know, me and structures, they always flip and flop between themselves. So I think I'll just make this more simplified, going through the characters and story at the same time. I'd say for this film, it juggles a big cast, some focusing on characters from the earlier films in the series, and others that are completely new. With what they are there to do with the story, on paper, some of it works quite well. In execution, however, I'm afraid certain ones do fall flat. I guess I could say in a simpler term, this movie has two main plot lines going for it: the Hollow Earth Monarch plot and the Apex conspiracy plot. And being quite honest here, with myself, after a first viewing, to me, one plot fares much better than the other. The story of Monarch trying to find Kong a new home and the human characters that we follow with said storyline works very well in favouring Kong's side of the story. When you look at the bare bones of it, he's just searching for a place to call home, and these humans are trying to help him achieve that goal. Simple but telling, and the kind of story that works well in making you root for Kong. The interactions between the humans in Kong's story, notably such as the little girl and her mother figure, Eileen Andrews, I think her name is, and Nathan Lind, one of the, I forget his job or whatever, but he's a member of Monarch, technically, I guess. He's on their team, whatever. But those characters and their interactions, the majority of their screen time in the story, I think they were endearing. I'd say, yeah, I could say they were entertaining for the human side at least. I think what they had going for them was simple stuff when it came to the story and their roles in the plot. But the plot they were in was more interesting, is what I can say. I feel like Nathan's character, I feel, would have benefited much more, if he was a pre-existing character from the series, because they established that he has a dead brother, and that's it, in the opening scene. We get a few moments throughout the film that have him strive to go on this mission because of his brother, you know, all that stuff. It's good, it's motivation, but this does continue the trend with, well, I guess, these recent MonsterVerse movies, where they just introduce characters in this said movie. I mean, they did it with King of the Monsters, they've done it with Kong, and they're unlikely to bring back any more those characters for the sequel, considering where the story's gone for this movie. But yeah, I feel like for a film series that's so far done a decent job at building a universe, it does suffer in that regard of having a lack of consistent characters, and I think that would have benefited a lot. Again, look to an earlier Let's Talk I did a few years ago about Godzilla. I still think that if they'd kept Bryan Cranston on, this could have fixed a few things. But yeah, back to Nathan, sorry. I think, yeah, he does suffer from this problem because you established his role in this movie, and that's all good and fine. It's surface level character development, I guess. But that's just it. It is surface level. You don't really get a chance to really invest with his character. Again, harkening back to Bryan Cranston, we spent the first half of the first Godzilla movie building up his story and what he does and why he does what he does. And had he stuck around, he could have been the perfect character that could have been the human heart of this series. As is, though, each movie does really kind of have to restart that it has to restart that arc, per se. And this is just another example, I think, of them just falling into that trap of, let's just have a new character introduced that does his job, and just give him basic motivations and stuff that the audience can empathise with, but you're not going to walk away thinking this character was the best character of the movie. And rightly so, this is a kaiju movie, we're not here to root for the humans. But it does help when you have a character that you can deeply root yourself in investment. And I think that Nathan's character and everyone else in the human cast, there's enough there, I think, for you to enjoy, to kind of understand what's going on, the drive and all that. I do think, however, it lacks in that oomph that the first Godzilla gave us, and that could have endeared us for the rest of the series, essentially. Went on a bit of a tangent there, sorry. But yeah, despite that stuff, I do think that, yeah, that plot really is the dominant plot that I enjoyed of the movie. Because, I mean, let's face it, we all kind of knew Hollow Earth was going to become a thing at some point. It was established in the earlier films. Although for some reason they, again, for some reason decide to re-establish it in this movie, which I guess makes sense, but again, I don't know, you'd think they would have brought in some other characters who already established this stuff in the previous movies, but yeah, I'm retreading here. But yeah, that's a storyline that was set up, and they technically pay it off in this movie. Again, sort of did it in King of the Monsters, but this is where they fully do it. And I enjoyed it. I liked the fact that we got to see a different side of the world to Godzilla vs. Kong, the MonsterVerse. It was nice to see this Land Before Time-esque part of the world, and it's opened the doors for a lot of potential, especially when it comes to the story of Kong. But what that plot does is definitely drive the movie for me, alongside, of course, the fights, and we'll get to that. But I think that was the most interesting plot. Where the film mainly lacks, however, is the other plot. And this, of course, is focusing mostly on the cast returning from the previous movie, King of the Monsters. And being very blunt here, it was very annoying. And I get this character has a name, and I'm sure this actor's a very nice guy. Again, you know, the drill. You know, you can't blame the actors, it's the story at the end of the day. But I'll just say it, podcast guy. I'm sorry, he was such a pain to watch. I'm aware that there is a certain charm to characters that search for the truth, but it really helps more when when that's not their character. That's not just their character. He needed to be more toned down, and more believable, I guess. I mean, that's saying much, because again, we have eccentric people out there, and there's a reason this trope exists, of course. But if he'd been more like Bryan Cranston's character, like Joe Brady, again, I'm sure that's the last name. Got me in names. But yeah, had he been a bit more calm, collective, he could have had his eccentric moments, but had he been a bit more, I don't know, maybe a bit more of an authoritative figure in the group, considering he is the only adult in that team, it would have, I think, made him more bearable. But as is, however, his consistent adherence to the stereotypical conspiracy nutjob who happens to be right, it left me feeling very frustrated a lot of the time he was on screen, and coupled with his clear attempts at humour, mostly from the bad script, it didn't really leave much of enjoyment for me. And this is a fact that I think also suffers with Madison Russell's character, Millie Bobby Brown. Her character also suffers from this storyline because outside of the script, also clearly trying to emulate much of the camaraderie and the tone likely taken from Stranger Things and the MCU, because again, every movie's had to have their set of jokes. Again, when you look at where this series began, it was very much grounded in a realistic world. And sure, we can have the movie go all sci-fi on us, sure. I mean, kaiju movies have always had that otherworldly element sometimes. I mean, we established we have aliens, thanks to King Ghidorah. I don't find it too stupid to think that humans can advance in less years than we have now. But when it comes to the tone of the series, I do feel like it's gone steadily a bit out of that area that it used to be in, which I think is what made it such a refreshing take. And that's not a problem. We've had good movies that have plenty of humour in them. Again, I can think of MCU films, but with Godzilla, I do think it had some good legs standing on it when it was taken very seriously, and it could have its fun moments, but it was predominantly a world filled with monsters and consequences. And sure, you had to kind of tone things up for the sequels, but I do think this kind of went a bit too far with the jokes, especially with this group of characters. It also doesn't help that this storyline, I think that the entire movie does suffer from this, but I think this storyline especially really goes through the motions, knowing what to do and what to say when the solution requires it. It's, even though by logic, I guess I'm getting ahead of myself. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a lot of these characters in this plot really just follow the trail and they do their thing, they say their lines, and they're good actors, but it does feel like they know stuff in advance that they shouldn't have to know, that they shouldn't know. I mean, there's a scene that comes to mind for me off the top of my head where Millie's character, Madison, is going through the Apex facility, and she knows how to open the door to a specific room, and she walks in nonchalantly like she's confident as all hell. And I get that, yeah, she's had not an unnatural background compared to normal teens. She's grown up in the shadow of her parents, who worked for this very influential company that are aware of kaiju. You're going to have a bit of a different upbringing, you're going to have a bit more confidence, you're going to have a bit more experience. But when you're in enemy territory, essentially, in a building that you've likely never been before, and even if it's part of the same company or part of the same technology, just going in nonchalantly, knowing what you're doing as if it's like your daily routine, it's a bit hard to kind of feel concerned, invested, or even assured of the character when they're just essentially following what the plot says. And this goes for everyone else too. The podcast guy, he knows certain things about the kaiju and the setups that, again, you can sort of understand to a degree, but when it's like, oh, I know what that thing is from King Ghidorah's skull, it's like, how? I get that you have in-depth research or whatever, but where at any point in the movie have you established, I don't know, again, I've only seen the movie once, so I can't defend every poor aspect, because for all I know, they probably did explain it in some form, and I've just missed that part of the movie. But as is, it does feel like the characters in that storyline did suffer from that a lot, and it was very hard to really feel invested or even concerned for this group of characters. And the less said about the third member of the party, the better. I'm sorry, I cannot remember his name for the life of me. I only know that the actor was in Deadpool, and that's about it. But his entire amount of screen time, god damn it, you could have just given it to Madison at this point, because his entire contribution is really just in the final act, and that's just to try and stop Mechagodzilla, but in the end, he just resorts to taking the podcast guy's whiskey and just destroying it, typical destroy the computer style, and that works, typical. But and yeah, it's just, Madison could have easily just done that. This guy, I mean, honestly, considering the other group of people he was with for the entire movie, when I first saw him on screen, I actually was empathizing with him more, because I felt like he was actually a bit more aware and like, yeah, you guys are being quite stupid here. You're walking into dangerous territory with no idea what we're going to find, and yet they just ignored him. It's just got very annoying there. But at the end of the day, just his entire amount of screen time could have just been given to Madison and end the story. It would have taken away much unneeded, pointless moments. And of course, now we get to the other characters, the villains. And honestly, Walter Simmons, he's just he's the stereotypical run-of-the-mill CEO of insert bad guy and company here, wanting to destroy the kaiju so that he can make humanity the apex predators of the world again. And that's expected. It's not like kaiju movies have given us the most compelling human antagonists in the past. However, what I did have a problem with was the handling of the secondary antagonist, when Ren Shizawa. Again, I'm sorry if I butchered the name, and his father's name. But yeah, his character was meant to be the son of Ishiro Shizawa, the character from the last two Godzilla movies, the character that, as I said in the previous episode, he should have been the main character, or one of them, along with Bryan Cranston, but hey, watch that video or whatever. And I'm telling you the truth here, I honestly had no idea they were connected whatsoever when I saw this movie for the first time. I honestly had no idea, and even when he was introduced, it was not until the end of the movie that I realised, and I had to look it up and go, oh, that guy's his father. What the fuck? It's such a waste. He exists in the movie purely to act as the man behind the mech, but is then killed off by Mechagodzilla before he can even take any action in the film. There could have been so much to explore with this character. Bouncing a bit off from, again, my previous episode, I said that Shirazawa should have been given more centre focus. Well, they didn't do that, so they could have done it at least with his son. They could have easily restructured the story and given us more time with him, seeing what he thinks about the kaiju, why he's on the side of Apex. Is he doing this because he holds a grudge against Godzilla for technically killing his father? It's pretty much never touched upon in the movie, and I'm sure they're going to probably retcon it, saying that indeed that was the cause of in expanded material, or maybe even another movie, which I highly doubt considering what happens to him in this movie. But for this film, that's supposed to have been the explanation. This is what you're meant to focus on, give us his motivation and all that jazz. It's completely... nah. I think that's my main gripe with this movie when it comes to the characters, because everyone else is sort of by the middle of their story. They service the story, all surface level stuff, but the waste of potential really in certain characters like Ren is just such a disappointment to me, because again, you have another example here where they could have done much more. Again, I feel like I don't want to repeat myself, so yeah, I'll just move on from there. Now, despite all the negativity I have been talking about, what else does this have to offer? Well, no surprise, it's the Kaiju Fights. And no shocker here, they are the highlight of the movie. And the reasons why Godzilla and Kong have to fight do feel consistent with the rules of the world that have been set up from the previous movies, and while the plot does favour you to empathise more with Godzilla, there is enough history behind the big lizard himself to make you realise he's doing this for a reason. So there's enough drive on both sides to make you root for each, which is better than BVS, I'll give you that. There's enough, I think, meat in this story to give you a justifiable reason and excuse really to see these two duke it out, and they do it well. It's just a shame that the human side of the storylines, specifically more on the Godzilla side, for me personally, lets most of the movie down. So I guess, yeah, after this very unscripted, long rant, I guess, yeah, I guess for an overall verdict, in the end, I would say my ranking for Godzilla vs. Kong is a solid 7 out of 10. It's good. It's good. This movie falls under the same category as King of the Monsters, in that it has grand spectacle, with great fight scenes that clearly show the weaknesses, strengths, and dominance behind our leading monsters, allowing each fan, I think, to have their moment with each fight. It is an entertaining movie that you can switch your brain off and enjoy if you want to see big monsters duke it out in an almost believable universe where there's enough emotion and heart to give you interest and even investment. Despite certain plot decisions, character and story decisions, that will likely leave you scratching your head. I think if you give it a chance, I'd say give it a watch. It's not a movie I'd highly encourage to see repeatedly, but it's at least entertaining, than most of the movies we've gotten really in the last few years, and it will at least deliver on what was promised for us from the beginning, which is of course the Kaiju Fights. So yeah, that's my basic review of Godzilla vs. Kong. Again, I think you can tell I've not done one of these reviews in a while, bit out of touch I guess, but hey, it's nice to get my thoughts out there, and yeah, I don't know if I'm going to make more of these, probably won't. I might come back and do some more maybe after things have gone a bit back to normal, when I can go and see movies again and enjoy the experience on the big screen. Or maybe if something comes up on TV I might give that a shot, but yeah, I've got some other stuff working at the moment, so yeah, you can keep an eye out for that. But yeah, in the meantime, thanks for tuning in. It was nice to talk about a movie for a change, and yeah, I'll see you next time. Goodbye.